Yeah, the budget advocacy work group came to be because of like people's necessity and I think communities' need for investment.
So the budget advocacy work group came together just really honestly out of relationships with folks doing work, social justice work in different sectors.
And the communities that have been impacted by a number of different things over the years, most importantly poverty and where the city invests money.
Bring these efforts and these campaigns and these movements and coalitions together to fight on one front.
So a group of different coalitions actually came together to form BOG back in 2018. BOG stands for Budget Advocacy Work Group.
So in the beginning, the Budget Advocacy Work Group was made up of 4 larger coalitions and campaigns: the Invest in Youth Coalition, the Sanctuary Long Beach Coalition, the Housing Habitability Coalition, and the Language Access Coalition.
You know, it was important for the People's Budget to go to the Long Beach City Council because budgets are statements of values.
Budgets are more than just numbers and spreadsheets, but they're, moral documents where we talk about our actual values.
Investments and allocations of dollars are what a community prioritizes.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I think all of us at the table were clear that the number one problem with the budget was that too much of the resources were going to policing. In Long Beach, I believe at the time, over 50% of the resources were going to public safety, right? I mean, think about that. We're doing our due diligence and organizing and educating folks in the community around what they believed should be the priority. And it was unanimous, whether we were talking to young people or older folks, that the number one priority for the city of Long Beach should be public health. Yet less than 1% of the budget was going to public health.
When you think about the budget's very dry. It's kind of complex. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of things. You're like, where does the money go? What's happening?
And that's a lot of process. And one of the things we learned throughout the entire campaign, the system was complex by design, but it was also meant to give people a surface understanding, but then not really understand the real core inner workings about how to actually move a policy or proposal forward.
As community organizations that got involved in the BOG, we wanted to make it accessible to community, for them to be able to digest it, right? For them to learn who is part of the Budget Oversight Committee. We came to find out that the most affluent districts were involved in the Budget Oversight Committee.
This was our opportunity to really start moving those conversations and those ideas into a very public realm, that we could actually have real concrete conversations about what does it look like to put equitable spending on the table and invest in communities.
Our goal was to have it accessible to community in many ways, right? And the way that we did that was like by doing teach-ins where we talked about the budget, we talked about where the money was going, we broke it down for folks, and then we told them this is how you can get engaged, right?
We did a lot of visioning and bringing folks to the table about, what's the work that you've been working on for years. We figured out what would that vision look like, and we came up with a plan for a press conference and an entire proposal called the People's Budget.
We laid out all of the Budget Oversight Committee meetings, all of the city council meetings, all of the districts, and we met with every single council member. We went to every single Budget Oversight Committee meeting, and we went to every single council meeting.
We had everyone from young people, high school students, all the way up to seniors who were impacted by housing issues, and everyone in between, even across racial communities, across different income spectrums. People who were really passionate about geeking out about public financing and budgeting, but folks who said, I didn't really care about that, but I know that my community is severely lacking in terms of resources and I care about this.
Having community members that don't speak the language in a process that is not accessible to them, in a place that is not friendly to them. Like this is this is how it works. Like people don't realize that, but city council starts at 5. You don't get to give public comment until like 8, 9, 10, 11, and you have community members be there present. Even if they just had work earlier that day, the kids have homework, like they were there with their kids giving testimony.
I remember meetings that we did one-on-one with city council members and bringing community members where people cried because these were such hard conversations, and knowing where our decision makers were at, whether they were with us or whether they were against us.
There were certainly some council members that understood that, right, and that aligned with our values and our vision. I think I'll speak for issues surrounded around the Invest in Youth campaign. Rex Richardson was our strongest champion.
The Sanctuary Coalition, which was advocating for the Long Beach Justice Fund, which is deportation defense, that was championed by then Councilwoman Lena Gonzalez. And then language access was also championed by 7th District Councilman Roberto Uranga.
And there were also people who were adversarial to it, who said things like, there are some people who should be deported, or maybe we have a lot of priorities in the city, but there are, language access just isn't one of them, or the system's working fine. There's nothing we need to do to actually change it.
That level of community budget advocacy, I don't think had ever happened before. Our narrative was controlling the city council's discussion. On the day of the final vote, there was first a budget oversight committee meeting. The budget oversight committee essentially sought to cut in half the mayor's proposed budget. And then we had to quickly pivot for the next meeting, which was the full council budget meeting or budget hearing.
And I remember when the budget oversight committee, who was calling for less money for youth development, and our young people just, opened up in roar and started cheering and chanting in the leading everybody in chant in the city council chambers. And it was seeing young people's righteous anger be like, hell nah, that ain't gonna fly, and stepping up to the podium, passionately sharing their stories and holding their feet to the fire. That was probably the most inspiring moment for me in this campaign.
The night we were in the city council chambers and the budget finally got approved with like 75% of the demands that we were pushing. And I remember sitting in those really uncomfortable chairs and looking at everybody else after the vote has counted. They went to a recess because they were done with everything, and realizing, holy crap, we actually won like a lot of the things we were pushing.
Dollar amounts that were tangible, that were usable, language access, the Sanctuary Coalition and the Long Beach Justice Fund, the Invest in Youth campaign. Each of those campaigns won concrete budget allocations.
And I remember the relief, the tiredness, the emotions of not just us as organizers, but also community members who were able to stick it out with us until midnight on a school night at city council, to see like history really being made, and the first time that there was a huge concerted effort to actually push for equitable spending in the city budget.
It showed the power of the collective, and it branded, I think, the people's budget.
I think BOG laid the ground for and the blueprint really for how community can organize and bring different movements together under one umbrella to ensure that budgets truly reflect the values of the community.
I think it's, we need to be able to acknowledge that this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't because community felt invested and that they could make it, make an impact and a change.
In debriefing afterwards, someone in our coalition mentioned they were talking because we were talking, and we forced that conversation. And I think that really made people notice at the end, whether it was media and covering our issues, or whether it was community members talking about like, here's what we tangibly won and here's what we're gonna do next year, right? It laid the groundwork for us to think even bigger year after year and think about what's the next step of what a people's budget could really look like.